Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahawashi, Bahasham, Rakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who ruled and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in the book of Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 1. And this whole book is dedicated to the biblical Edomites, or you so-called white people, and your downfall. As the header reads, Edom will be humbled. The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord Yahweh concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. And that ambassador sent among the heathen is the men of the Lord, the prophets of the Most High, out on the highways and byways preaching this word, as well as putting up video epistles online. And if the Spirit's dealing with you, you can clearly see that GMS, or Great Millstone, as well as the brothers that come in the spirit of Great Millstone, hey, are those ambassadors of Yahweh Bahasham Yahawashi, breaking down these scriptures and these prophecies with 144% accuracy. And an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Hey, these other nations across the planet are starting to wake up to the fact that you Edomites, especially in the United States of America, are the root cause of all these different issues taking place on the planet right now. But now I'm going to jump down to verse 7, which is dealing with America's allies, including her European Edomite allies, turning against her. All the men of thy confederacy, or your allies, have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. And I opened up the video with these verses to preface a video on the Lena Petrova CPA Finance, Economic, and Tax YouTube channel titled BRICS is Growing. France, an Edomite nation, is the first European country to join, ? And as we'll see in this clip, France is interested in joining the BRICS. And the BRICS is an economic bloc which consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And more nations are joining unto it. And it's a major, what's that word I'm looking for? It's growing to be a rival economic structure to the Western, economic, political, and military structures. And it's a very major thing that you've got a major Western European Edomite nation having interests in joining BRICS. That's them completely going against the dictates of the West, specifically the United States of America. And that's an example of, again, Obadiah 1 verse 7. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. And as we get closer and closer to the end of all things, the end of this current age of the rulership of the heathen nations, chiefly by the biblical Edomites, before the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven, you're going to see these different Edomite nations turn against each other, and especially them turn against the United States of America, because the U.S. is really at the head of this Western power structure right now, this NATO-EU alliance, which is the last leg of the fourth beast in Daniel chapter 2. This is Daniel chapter 2. I'm going to start at verse 40, and this is dealing with that statue of a man that King Nebuchadnezzar of the Neo-Babylonian Empire had in that dream that the prophet Daniel interpreted for him. The head of gold being the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the arms and the breasts of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire, the thigh and the belly of brass, being the Grecian Edomite empires. And in verse 40, and the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, those legs of iron. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And that is the ancient pagan Edomite Roman Empire, and even says in the header that it's Rome. But now we're coming into the last leg, that fourth beast, those iron toes mixed with miry clay, which began to come into existence during the Renaissance, or the rebirth, when these Edomites started coming back into power for this little season of their final rulership, which we're at the end of right now. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, that NATO-EU alliance that the U.S. is a part of and is at the head of. The U.S. is that whore that rides upon the beast with the 10 horns in Revelation chapter 17, which we're going to get later. The kingdom shall be divided. And as we're going to see in that clip from Lena Petrovic's YouTube channel, hey, this kingdom is clearly divided. That's a very significant thing for a major Western European power to start looking towards the East, looking towards America's enemies as a future possibility of economic activity and a future alliance. But there shall be in it of the strength of iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And the iron represents the stronger nations in this power structure, such as the U.S., Britain, France, Germany, while the clay represents the weaker nations economically, for instance, which are usually referred to as the pigs: Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. But as we can clearly see, not only is there, divisions with the iron and clay for, reasons like economics. The stronger nations don't like pulling the weight of the weaker nations. But as we're starting to see, now there are divisions amongst the iron itself. France looking towards BRICS for a possible economic and political future. Verse 42, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And ultimately, this kingdom is going to be completely broken when, at some point during World War III, all of America's allies are going to turn against her and ally themselves with Russia and her allies, and they're all together going to shoot 200 million nuclear missiles onto the United States of America, turning it into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. And we're seeing the divisions and the breaking up of this kingdom right now. Hey, again, with France showing interests in joining the BRICS nations. But without further ado, let's get into this clip. And I'm only going to play the first couple of minutes of it. And this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes.
Hello and welcome to my channel. Thank you for being here. Will France become the first European country to join BRICS? Well, as it turns out, it may be a possibility. France just openly expressed interest to join the alliance and asked for an official invitation to its next meeting. By the way,
And whether they do or not, hey, this is just the signs of the times, the signs of prophetic times, showing that these prophecies are coming to their fulfillment. We read that America's allies will turn against her and prevail against her, and however it plays out, it will play out.
If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, go ahead and join my channels on YouTube and Rumble for frequent updates. I would love to have you back. French President Macron has asked South African President Ramaphosa for an invitation to the upcoming BRICS summit that is scheduled to take place in Pretoria, South Africa. Reportedly, South African president was completely caught off guard by this request and asked for some time to discuss the idea with other BRICS members prior to extending an invitation. BRICS members are developing nations, so if France does become its newest member, and of course it takes time, it doesn't happen quickly, but if it is approved, France would be the first Western country, a G7 nation, to join a bloc of emerging economies. Of course, it sends a very clear signal, primarily that France is looking to align itself with the countries of the global south that possess immense amounts of natural resources and are quickly finding reasons to join forces. The French news outlet says Pretoria remains uncommittal and it is not clear if it would choose to extend an invitation to other international leaders. So that doesn't sound quite like a warm welcome, but do let me know in the comments below what you make of that. Macron's relations are not exactly great with the main members or the founding members of the BRICS bloc. For example, he signed a joint agreement with other G7 leaders just last month, essentially labeling China, quote, the greatest challenge to global security and prosperity in our time. Yet now he's seeking to effectively become its partner. In addition to that, France previously condemned Russia for gaining more and more influence among African nations who see it as a partner rather than a former master, if you will. So really interesting dynamic, really interesting developments, and I would say a really interesting and surprising move to join these BRICS countries. France is increasingly starting to voice opinions that don't really align with the Western world. The country has already started to accept the Chinese yuan in exchange for LNG, liquefied natural gas. This was the first time in recent history when a European country chose not to use the United States dollar for commodity purchases. So,
For as much as the kingdom was part of iron and part of clay, the kingdom shall be divided.
it is not too surprising that France is now calling on the European Union to end its reliance on the US dollar in order to avoid certain risks. Even more surprisingly, Macron added that France and Europe as a whole must not be caught up in crises that are not theirs. Of course,
The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and laid that wound under thee. These European nations are getting sick of always feeling the blowback from U.S. military, economic, and military adventurism abroad. This is Daniel chapter 7. I'm going to read verses 19 to 20. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, again speaking of that ancient pagan Edomite Roman Empire, which was diverse from all the others, because this was the first kingdom with what? A Senate house with elected political leaders, just like the United States of America and these different Western democracies today, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and the Romans were known for using iron-made weaponry, hence why they had a heavy advantage over the other heathen nations back then, and his nails of brass, which devoured, break in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And now we're going into the continuation of that ancient pagan Roman Empire, the beginnings of those iron toes mixed with miry clay, and of the 10 horns which were in his head, and of the other which came up, speaking of that little horn who had eyes and a mouth like a man and spake very great things, the United States of America, and before whom 3 fell. And that's talking about the major players in this landmass of North America before what you know as the 13 colonies became the United States of America proper today. And that's speaking of France, Britain, and Spain. And the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout, more powerful, more commanding, more proud than his fellows. If you've ever noticed, it's always the United States of America making the decisions and these other European Edomite nations following suit, even to their own detriment. Just look at all these recent wars, such as Iraq, Afghanistan, the Syrian civil war, and the Libyan civil war. It wasn't the United States of America that saw those refugee crises. It was Europe that saw these different refugees displaced by the wars, flooding their countries and being a burden on their system. And then look at this whole situation with Ukraine. The U.S. pushed these other European nations into putting sanctions and sending weapons to Russia. And then what did Russia do? Turn around and cut off a lot of them from receiving cheap natural gas and oil from Russia, which was very beneficial to them. So now a lot of them are struggling and they got to turn to the U.S. to buy much more expensive oil and natural gas. And then lest we forget the Nord Stream 2 pipeline project, which was a joint project between Germany and Russia, which would have heavily benefited Germany and these other European nations in getting a cheap and efficient LNG and oil from Russia. Uncle Sam sabotaged that. So now these European nations are just in a much harder economic situation out here. And like that old saying goes, you can only bully somebody so much before they turn around and hit the bully. That's where we're getting right now. These European nations are getting sick of America with his more stout look than her fellows bullying them. So now they're looking to alternatives. They're looking towards the East for better economic and political prospects. And again, what that ultimately is going to culminate into is America's allies turning against her at some point during World War III to ally themselves with Russia and her allies to shoot those nukes onto her.
Talking about the debt crisis in the United States that nobody here really talks about anymore, as if it doesn't exist, as well as other issues that involve China and the United States. Macron gave an interview recently and he emphasized his theory of strategic autonomy for Europe that, according to his beliefs and his views, would allow it to become, quote, the third superpower. And so he must see the controversial, rapidly expanding BRICS bloc as a tool to gain that autonomy, to gain that status and independence from the currency that has become a means to an end, that has become a tool. Right now,
that's it with this clip. But hey, the only next superpower is going to be the Kingdom of Israel, ruled by the children of Israel, known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. But before the Kingdom of Heaven is ushered in, World War III is going to take place, where again, America's own allies are going to turn against her and shoot nukes on her as well. Remember, France is a nuclear weapon holding nation. But now I'm going to close it out in Revelation chapter 17, verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, the 10 horns speaking of the EU or European Union, beginning with the first 10 common markets of the EU, back when it was known as the European Economic Community, which France was a part of. And the beast is NATO. These shall hate the whore that rides upon the beast, Babylon, mystery Babylon, Babylon the Great, that virgin daughter, the United States of America, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire from those 200 million nuclear missiles that they're going to shoot onto her at some point during World War III, after they allied themselves with Russia and her allies. Just read Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 9. Let's get it real quick. For lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon, Babylon the Great, the daughter of Babylon, the United States of America, an assembly of great nations from the north country being Russia, because what's north of the U.S., Canada, that Arctic Ocean region, and then Russia. And Russia has been building up its military capabilities in the Arctic recently, nuclear capable. And it's a well-known fact that Russia shooting missiles from itself from the north across that Arctic Ocean region to reach the U.S. would be the shortest trajectory time for those missiles to reach the U.S. And that assembly of great nations from the North Country are not only Russia's allies, like China, North Korea, or Iran, but also America's own allies, the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, her European allies, and they shall set themselves in array against her. From thence she shall be taken. Their arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain. And those arrows are symbolic for those nuclear missiles, because when the prophets saw these visions thousands of years ago, they didn't know what a modern day ICBM was. So they described it with what they knew during their times, ancient weapons of war, and missiles look just like arrows. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. As we can clearly see, we're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites, primarily from the United States of America. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.